It boasts the tallest peak in North America, immense glaciers, untouched wilderness. But Denali National Park, Alaska, is changing. That's why Camille Seaman is here. Many flock to Denali to take pretty pictures, but few match her passion for capturing images of ice, a compulsion that's taken her to the coldest, most distant places on Earth. Now, she's shifting her focus to America's ground zero for climate change.
Can we do something in time? Like, can we save this place? Or am I just kind of having a selfish indulgence of being able to visit this place before it's changed or altered irrevocably?
She's arrived here from far away, a California city girl. When the opportunity arose to visit the North as Denali's artist in residence, she couldn't resist.
You know, some people get a wanderlust or a travel, like an itch. And it's really interesting. I've been paying a lot of attention to the feeling, and it's not that. It almost feels more like a magnet. Like it is really that kind of pull for me.
The magnetic pull of wild places.
Where I lived on Long Island had woods quite like this.
Stems from a childhood spent surrounded by nature. She grew up in Long Island, strongly influenced by her Shinnecock native roots. A grandmother who gardened and fished, a grandfather who taught her everything is connected.
So when we would walk in the woods and he would literally introduce me to the trees, he really required that you stop at each tree and acknowledge it physically. Place your hands on it and understand that it's a relative to you and that you must respect these things.
That idyllic life ended when her parents divorced. She was uprooted to New York City, where things were very different. She was 15, living on her own, running with misfit, drug-abusing, at-risk kids, until someone gave her a camera.
Having that camera in my hands, I was really able to make something beautiful.
She's had a camera at her side ever since. But she never considered becoming a professional photographer until the collapse of two monumental buildings, so much a part of her city life. When America went to war, she decided she needed to record beauty instead.
When those buildings fell, as I held my daughter watching it on TV, I understood that she would never know those buildings in the way that I had, except through film or a photograph. I just knew that I had this intention to document what was beautiful and awesome about this planet and life on it. And one thing led to another, and here we are in this car.
Here she is, in Denali.
So glad you're here. Thank you for bringing this weather.
The first photographer ever to be invited as an artist to the park. Here to learn about the park's charms and share what she's learned during a project that took her to the extreme ends of the planet. What began with an accidental trip to the far north led to her becoming an expedition photographer on science vessels and commercial ships. For a decade, she summered in the Arctic, wintered in Antarctica.
I am bipolar. Well, not clinically, but...
The icebergs mesmerized her. She still remembers the first one she saw.
We had this crazy Norwegian captain, and he was taking us in between these icebergs that were towering like 200 feet above us on either side. Some had waterfalls coming off and, glowing neon. And I just remember looking at them and thinking, like how many snowflakes there it was. And it reminded me of that time when my grandfather said, that's your sweat that makes the rain, that makes the snow, that feeds the animals and the plants. And So I was thinking, how many ancestors ago was this? How many ancestors' sweat is this? And tears and water.
She photographed icebergs as if taking portraits of her ancestors. Along the way, she met the peoples of the land and birds and animals so famously part of these places. After years of flying herself like an Arctic tern from pole to pole, she also began witnessing change. The ice melting, its effects rippling. An encounter with a swimming polar bear, then climbing a giant cliff, was when it hit home.
And then he looked over and he saw this whole colony of eider ducks, of glaucous gulls, of kittiwakes, and a smaller bird called a murre, and an ox. The ox had their nest there too. And this bear we watched it for 2 hours, just go from nest to nest, and you could see it was like, with the egg dripping, and and the birds all fluttering, and that's how hungry these bears are because there's no sea ice. And in that instance, I recognized that those birds won't make the trip, well, the young ones won't make the trip back to Northern Europe. And then they won't eat the insects there. And those insects will then maybe create some blight for the crops or trees, or, it's an interruption in the cycle.
That was her last trip to shoot the ice.
It was hard because I did love the place so much, and it had become such a part of my life. But there was no ice. We could have kept going had we had enough fuel, and that just shouldn't be.
If Alaska is America's last frontier, it's also the front line for global warming. In Denali, signs of warming abound, from leaning trees caused by thawing permafrost to concern for the iconic Dall sheep.
Dall sheep are why this area was made into a national park.
Park scientist Dave Shirakawa points out how the tree line is slowly creeping up the alpine, steadily reducing sheep habitat.
Each species is going to have its own unique response to climate change, and the ones we're concerned about are caribou and sheep. And the spectacular white sheep of the park are why it's here. So that would be, sad if their population diminishes.
Diminishing too, Alaska's glaciers, ice built up over hundreds, thousands of years, now in slow retreat.
Glaciers in Alaska are definitely losing mass.
Joanna Young is a transplanted Canadian, part of a University of Alaska team of glaciologists whose measurements show about 1 meter of ice disappears every year.
Glaciers are often referred to as sort of a canary in the coal mine. They're a great example, a great metric that shows us that climate change is real and that these changes are happening, and they're happening at an accelerating rate.
Alaska's thinning glaciers shed huge amounts of fresh water with global impacts on ocean levels and circulation. It's one of the reasons Joanna started Girls on Ice, a program that teaches kids about climate change.
I'm worried about the consequences of these changes, and I hope for a day when the population, society kind of works together to recognize that this is a real issue, and we can start thinking more along the lines of mitigation and adaptation, and ultimately how to be resilient about the fact that these changes will be happening and are happening, as opposed to still having a debate over whether or not they're occurring in the first place.
Camille Seaman came to Alaska to create art, has no pretensions of being an expert on science, but she's heard many scientists on her journeys to poles now endangered.
What they know is critical. What they are the Paul Revere running through the streets saying, the climate is changing, the climate is changing. And it's our job to listen to them.
When she started photographing Arctic wonders, she wasn't thinking about climate change. But the more she learned, the more she pondered her daughter's future and generations beyond.
Do you want to come here with your grandchildren, or even they come here with their grandchildren 100 years from now and say, this place it used to have snow and glaciers and these amazing, mystical white sheep. And now they're gone. We only speak about them in myths and stories. I think it just gets to a point when you're like, you have to say, what can I do? And again, like, I can't say I feel that making a photo is very important. And in fact, I felt sort of sad that that's all I could do. You know, I was like, I can make a pretty picture, you know, but that's what I can do, and so that's what I'm going to do.
She hopes her images bring attention to precious parts of the world that are changing because of us. Duncan McHugh, CBC News, Denali National Park, Alaska.